It's going to be a watercolor painting done on location, and I'll be doing each section. I'll be blocking in the full painting with all the colors and everything up to a certain point. I'm going to bring it back to the studio and modify it and finish it up in the studio as a finished painting. Hey, this is Everett. This is Everett. Welcome to my studio. And this is Everett Watercolors. And I'm broadcasting live from Chesapeake, Virginia. And welcome aboard to everyone in the U.S. I'm broadcasting to and around the world. And I'm in the studio today with my wife, Gloria.
Hello and welcome.
And she'll be monitoring the broadcast and also checking the chat room. And if you have questions or comments, please type into the comments on the chat room, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Also, I'll get back to you after the broadcast if you have any questions or comments. So leave me a comment and leave me a like and subscribe if you're a brand new viewer, and I'd appreciate that. It helps with my ratings on YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn. Now today I'm going to show another video. I did a plein air again last weekend. Plein air. The weather is just beautiful. So this is the time of year when I get out and I paint most of the weekends as often as I can. But I've got a real interesting subject today, a split rail fence. And I'll go over that with you in detail. But I think I'd rather leave that to the little video I have here of what I did on location, getting started on this plein air. Now I'm going to bring it back here to the studio, and I'm going to modify that plein air painting and go over some things that I've also done. So we're going to have a little bit of fun today, and I hope you enjoy. So I'm going to turn on the demo, and I'll come back. Oh, just before I leave though, that little symbol over here, the QR symbol over here on the left side, the bottom here, that's a QR code, and I'm getting up to date on technology. But if you take your iPad or your cell phone and scan that particular one, it'll take you right to my website. Take you right straight to my website. So anyway, you might want to try that out and let me know how that works. I tried it out. It works on my computer, so I know it should work for you. But try it out and then give me a comment on it. Make sure that it does work for you also. Okay, so let me take it to my demo will be on live here in just one more second, and I'll come back and we'll continue with the discussion. Here's another plein air exercise with Split Rail Fence at Sunrise by Everett Watercolors. And here I am at the location outdoors, and boy, what a beautiful sunrise. And I can't wait to get started. So I'm on location. And I'll be at the Great Bridge Battlefield and Waterways Park. That's where I'm located.
This is my basic setup here. I got my easel, and I got my larger palette today, which because I'll need a little more color. And I got my 3 standard brushes, 3/4 inch flat, number 8 round, and I'm going to get a small rigger, so I'll use those 3 brushes. And I've got my 140-pound Gemini watercolor paper. It's a 1/4 sheet, and I've done a small drawing on there to get started.
This sketch is available on my website for download. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to block in the sky and start out with wetting the paper with my dot spray bottle in a bottle, palette in a bottle, with just plain water. And I'm going to start with Ultramarine Blue for the blue sky at the top. And it's wet on wet. I wet it down with the spray bottle and got the paper the halfway down wet with water. And now I'm just putting a little bit of light coating of ultramarine blue to get started with the sky. And then I start putting a little bit of yellow ochre in. As you come down toward the horizon, the sky gets a little warmer. So putting a little yellow ochre and then also yellow lemon. So the sky starts to get a little paler. And now yellow orange, because the sunrise, I want to start introducing the sunrise colors. So that yellow orange is going to bring the sky down to a warmer color. And that's going to bring it all the way. I'm going to take that on down to the horizon. Now I'm using a 3/4 inch flat brush here that I use on Plein Air. And here I'm wiping up the loose wet drops down at the bottom. When you have your painting at an angle like this, the paint and the water is going to flow down to give you a bead at the bottom. So you got to control it. Now I'm adding a little more yellow orange here. This is my focal point. So I'm putting that darker color there because that's going to be my focal point area where the sunrise is coming through those trees. It's a beautiful morning out here this morning. There's the view I have of the sun coming through the trees. Now, the next thing I'm going to the pathway. Now, this is a asphalt road here, but I turned it into a pathway of dirt. So I'm starting with a lighter mixture here of yellow ochre mixed in with a little bit of burnt sienna. Start out with a light color first at the horizon line there. And as I move forward, I get a little bit darker, picking up a little bit of burnt sienna and brushing that in there. So I'm covering the pathway here with what I call an earth tone or a dirt mixture. I'm calling it a pathway. Now, as I get down toward the bottom here of the pathway, toward the bottom of the painting, I'm going to pick up a little bit of ultramarine mixed in with that burnt sienna. It will give me a darker color. So I'm going from light to dark. This also gives me the impression of depth, going from light to dark. And also, it also sets the bottom of the painting into a darker area because I want the eye to go toward the lighter area, which is where the sunrise is. So adding up a little more paint here with water, and I'm continuing to paint a little bit of ultramarine mixed in with the burnt sienna, give me a darker brown at the bottom of the painting here. I'm using 1/4 sheet of paper, so there's a lot here to cover. So this 3/4 inch brush is doing a pretty good job, but it still takes a little while to fill in the blank paper. And I want to cover the bottom here completely. I'm going to leave some white paper showing here and there to show my little sparkle that I usually do in most of my paintings. I leave a little bit of white paper showing, give a little sparkle, a little movement into the painting with white paper showing. Now just finishing up the edges here to adding that dark mixture at the bottom of the painting. And filling out the bottom of the painting area. Now I'm going back and kind of blending in the colors now to put in the colors so they'll come to give me a nice blended light to dark finished painting look with a look of texture. Now I'm using a number 8 round brush, mixing up a little darker color here. I'm going to start there in the background. I'm going to start adding in those trees, the background trees. And right now I'm just going to show the trunks and some of the prominent limbs in the background. this is springtime weather, so we still see a lot of bare trees in the landscape. So and this is also sets off the impact area a little bit, because that keeps the sunrise colors coming through those bare trees, gives me a lot more impact in my impact area. So I'm going to switch to a rigger brush. I got some fine branches that I want to add to these trees, so I'm going to use the rigger brush with a mixture. I'm using a little bit of burnt sienna and yellow ochre. A yellow ochre and a little bit of ultramarine blue to give me a darker brown color is what I'm using. Same mixture I use for making the pathway. So the rigger brush is adding a little finer detail just to give me indications of those longer branches. And now I'm using a bristle brush, and I've got some dark paint mixed up with Hooker's green and a little bit of ultramarine blue. And now I'm stippling the brushes. The brush stroke is a stippling motion, and I'm putting in those background trees, the dark background trees. And as you know, in watercolor, this color is going to lighten up anyway, but you got to put it in dark to get started, even though I know it's going to be lighter when I finish. But I want to start with the darkest color here, at least get the painting started. So I'm blocking in the background trees with this wet brush, and you can see the water is, because I've got it at such a high angle, the water will start, because of the water in the brush and on the paper, will start running down the paper. But we'll take care of that in a minute. It's no big deal, not to worry. So continue to stipple along, getting the edges of those trees at the top. Again, I'm just blocking in these shapes for right now. Just get me started with a base coat of color and a base coat of texture for those background trees. Now, we're worried about those little drips there, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a paper towel and just pick that up. And also, what's left over will be little marks on the paper. I need texture in the pathway and texture other places, so this will add a little more texture to the painting, even though it was unprepared. I don't call it an accident. I just call it something that happens and you take advantage of it. So leave that white paint in there, mix it around a little bit. Now I'm using just a paper towel, and I'm just blotting away, picking up the wet paint. Even at the bottom of that tree line there's a little bit of extra moisture down there. I'm picking it up with a paper towel. And that'll also give me a little bit of texture. So that's the way to take care of a problem like that.
So this is the fence line to the right-hand side, which is the split rail fence. And what I've done is add that to the composition on the right.
Okay, so I'm using the subject here that I see from the photograph I just showed you, but I'm also looking at it here firsthand. And I've got a picture up here on the top left that I'm using now to paint in the split rail fence line on the right-hand side of the pathway here. So I'm just right now I'm painting in with the number 8 round brush with some dark color, ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, and probably mixed in a little bit of Payne's gray also to get a dark color. So I'm just going to block in some of the major shapes here to get this started today. The photograph up here at the top left is the actual subjects I'm looking at as I paint, and I drew this out ahead of time in my sketch to give me an idea of the reference. So that's a reference photograph for this particular area off to the right side of the pathway. Now these split rail fences are colonial style fences. They were made back in 1750s, 1760. And this is these were very famous back there in those times, on farms and things like that. They keep the cattle inside the pastures and so forth, and also to identify property limits. So these split rail fences were very prominent in the colonial times, and there's no nails involved. These are all just put together with pressure from the pressure of the wood, and forced in there by angles that they're lying in there, and so they're just handmade. They can be taken apart and moved and relocated. So they're very, very practical fence line at that time, without the fancy equipment and so forth back in the 1800s. But I really enjoy painting these old fences. So this is why I picked the subject matter for today's Plein Air.
I have another spot here off to the right-hand side. I'm going to use this part of the fence line here on the left-hand side. So I'll do a little bit of composition work today with a couple of photographs, a couple of videos. But I think it'll turn out to be interesting. So let's see how it goes.
So I took the opportunity for the other fence line here right nearby. I took photographs of it and took a short video of it, which I showed you just recently. And there's a picture there up in the upper right. There's another section of fence line right nearby. So I took a photograph of that and also a short video. And I'm using that as a reference to put on the left side of the pathway. And this is also experimental. I want to see how this works out. When I drew it in by pencil, it looked like it was going to work okay. So I figured here, when I paint it here on location, there'll be another opportunity to take a look at it and also to try and see if it works. And right now, it's working just fine. I think if you look at the front of the fences, it's larger, and as you go back, the fence is smaller, which gives me a good indication of perspective and also gives me depth in the painting. So large in the front, small in the back, gives me a good sense of depth and a good sense of dimension and distance in the painting. And that's exactly what I wanted to show. I wanted to show depth in the painting. And again, I'm having a good practice here painting these split rails. And with a round brush and with some dark paint, and I'm just using like a dry brush technique here, you really can't make any mistakes because they're so ragged looking and irregular shaped poles. They're not square, they're not straight. They bend and they have different angles on them, so really you can get away with just about any brush stroke at all. It'll work. I'm just concentrating on the angle that they're located and basically the shape and the size. And this will be something I'll work on back in the studio, but right now I'm just putting it in. I'm blocking in these shapes right now just to get the essence and the feeling for what I see here. And right here I'm painting from the sketch that I made on the paper. I really don't have a reference in front of me I'm looking at. I use that photograph above there to the right as my reference diagram. Now here I'm blocking in some of the foliage behind the fence line because I got to come up with a color behind. But right now, just to get started, I'm going to put a little bit of mixture of green, which is using yellow, using a little bit of yellow lemon mixed in with ultramarine blue, just to give me a green color, and to mark in some of those background foliage, which is behind the fence line. So this is just to fill in some of the white space and give me an indication, give me a hint of what I want to do back in the studio with some colors. And there are some low-lying bushes back there, so that does make sense to put a darker green element there in the background. looking forward to getting back in the studio where I can add a little more detail to this painting. But this is a good start. Now, there's some branches there in the back. I'm using the rigger now again, and I'm collecting some of those branches there in the impact area where the sunrise is coming between those trees. So these will mark a real interesting shape now that I'll have in the impact area to give a little more attention, a little more interest back there, along with the color change of the sunrise. I'll be back in the studio to work on the painting. And this is what the paint looks like now. You can see how it lightened up very quickly, and we'll work on that as soon as I get back into the painting table. We're back again. Well, you can see there that during the plein air, and the plein air purpose there was to collect information. So I was able to block in all the features that I saw, the background trees and those split rail fences on both the right and the left-hand side. And you can see I did a little composition work there, and I'll go over that with a couple of my photographs. And I'll show you how I did that. But the purpose of the plein air demonstration, the purpose of doing plein air is to collect information, to learn about the subject matter, and to see how you can be painted, and also to gather the colors and the shapes and the sizes. So let's go to my painting table, and I want to continue on with the discussion of the split rail fences. Okay, well, this is my this photograph here is my inspiration. And when I took this photograph here, this is what really inspired me. It was a sunrise part of the day. This was like 6:15 in the morning, and the sun was just coming up over the meadows there. And then I saw this split rail fence, and I said, "Oh, I got to paint that." But that was just part of the problem. This was only on one side of the road, the blacktop road here. So I said, "Well, I got to improve on that." So I went right here next to it, in the same area. There was another split rail fence, and I took a photograph of that. And you can see if I took these both photographs together, the one here on the right and the one here on the left, and I can bring them together, I can come up with a match of the right and left side of the roadway. So that was my idea, to take both of these photographs and put them together. And what I did, I went to my Photoshop program and actually did a Photoshop. I did the photograph on the right, and then I merged, or I put the photograph on the left over here, and then I blocked in a little pathway here in the middle. So this will give me an idea of what kind of design I would have as far as the final painting. So I've gone ahead and I've made a sketch of that particular design. So this is my design sketch that I did from both photographs. So that was the preparation I did before I went out to do the plein air. I had an idea of the design. I had an idea of what the fence lines I'm going to use and so forth. And then I had a drawing here, which I started out with. Okay, so this is what I started with when I was doing the actual outdoor painting. Now, these two photographs, the left and right side, these two photographs, and the drawing here are in my Fun with Watercolors page, which you can download, and you can paint along with me and do a similar painting. The colors I'm using today and on the plein air, I use the Holbein Watercolors. I'm going to be using Holbein watercolor brushes and also one silver brush. And I'm using a Gemini watercolor paper. Everettswatercolors.com is my website, which I showed you that QR code on the beginning of the program. And my Fun with Watercolors, that is also, you can find that on my website. Fun with Watercolors. That's where you download the photographs that you can use as references. The two photographs of the tree line and then the photograph of the drawing. And then you can post your painting in Everett's Watercolor Art Group on Facebook. And I'll have the links in the description below so that you can also get the photographs, and you can get the link to the Facebook page. And I really enjoyed to see someone paint along, and and I'll make comments on your painting. So I welcome you to do that. Let me put this aside. Okay, so let's get into today's painting. Move this aside also, the drawing. Okay, this is a painting as I brought it back from the Plein Air, and you can see that when that Plein Air, the colors were very dark out there when the paint is wet, and of course when it dries about 40% lighter, which is what happened here. So I'm looking at what I can do here. So what I did was I took a photograph of the painting on regular photo paper, and then I copied this onto a heavier sheet of paper, and I did a little painting design. And you can see here I've darkened the background trees, and I've put in a shadow pattern here on the roadway, and I've changed the fence line into a white fence, and I think it'll show up much better. So this is my painting plan that I'm going to make to the Plein Air. This Plein Air, I'm going to implement this onto this painting here. So this is how I'm going to modify the Plein Air painting. So this is my painting plan. Now the tools I'm going to use the paintbrush from Silverbrush. This is the small one. And I'm going to use the bristle brush, which I used also in Plein Air. I've got the 1/2-inch flat brush from Holbein, the number 6 round water brush from Holbein, and the number 4 rigger. Okay, those are all synthetic brushes, and these brushes here are available on my website, and along with the Hake brush is available on my website. This brush here can be bought at the hardware store. It's a hardware store brush. Also, I'm going to be using a couple dot spray, fine mist spray bottles today. This is palette in a bottle, fine mist sprayers, and they're with a black top for the fine mist. And I've got some colors here that I'm going to be using in the painting today. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to darken up the background. So let me mix up some paints. I use a little bit of Ultramarine Blue. These are the same colors I used out on Plein Air. I'm just going to make them a lot darker for another layer. So Ultramarine Blue and Booker's Green to make me a dark green. I put a little bit of black color in there. Put some Payne's Gray to make it even darker. Now, first thing you want to do is when you put a brush into water, you also want to be able to, I'm going to have a towel here next to me. Yeah, I'll do that first. Okay, we're going to do the background trees first. I did it a different way when I did the preparation plan, but you know, you can always change your ideas when you get in the middle of something. So I'm going to go ahead now and go ahead and put in some darker color here. I'm using a bristle brush to get started, and I think I'll swap that also. I'm going to take that out, rinse it out in water, and I'm going to load up. I'm going to put the yellow orange in there, just the yellow orange, and I'm going to use the paintbrush for the background. So I wet the brush first to get it wet, and I'm going to dry it out on a towel. That way I don't want too much water in the brush. I just want a damp brush is all I need. And then I load it up from the palette. And I'm going to use the Hake brush to put in the trees. As I come over to this area here, I'm going to pick up the bristle brush And I'm going to put a little more color here in the sky. This is a sunrise, so I'm going to put a little bit of sunrise color in here. Got yellow orange in there. Then I'm going to continue on with the hake brush. And I use the edge of the brush, the corner of the brush. That gives me the impression of the leaves and the limbs here on these tall trees, these taller trees. And I'll move over here to the other side. I pick up some more paint. Be sure the brush is dry. I don't want the brush wet. I want the damp. I want a damp brush, and then pick up the paint on a damp brush. Okay, I'm going to put the indication over here of some more bushes and trees. So I'm making the background darker, much darker. Dark background with a light middle ground will make it show up much better. I think you saw that from my design plan there, my painting plan. So it's always a good idea to have a painting plan before you start the make the actual changes to a painting. You want to have some kind of idea where you're going. So this hake brush does a nice job on the edges here. It makes them look like real trees out there with the limbs and branches and the leaves showing against the skyline, the early morning sun. You saw that photograph I did, the picture on the video intro, on the Plein Air video, where the sun was really coming through these trees, really popping through. That was very dramatic. But as usual, the sunshine or sunrise doesn't last very long. Probably got about 45 minutes to an hour, and then the sun gets too high, and it takes away the lighting effect you're looking for. Okay, now I'm going to put introduce a little more of that yellow orange in here because I want some yellow orange coming through from the sunrise. Okay, I'm gonna dry that because it's wet. Let me dry that part of the painting. What I've done here in the background, I've added a much darker value, knowing that the value was going to change if I come back here to the studio. So I mixed up a real dark green mixture of Ultramarine Blue and Hooker's Green. And I painted in that background trees with a hake brush. Okay, I want to get that partially dry. Okay, so now I'm going to move to the next step. Now I'm going to use the spray bottle technique down here for these background on these behind these fence posts. Because what I'm going to do is make this dark. So I'm going to make a little mask here with a couple pieces of paper, and I'll make sure I got a little here this portion here. So I don't want to cover anything around the outside of the fence line. And then I'm going to put, let's see, I got to move this up here, move that aside. I'm going to put a towel underneath here. I'm going to be using a spray bottle. So I want to cover up all my paints and things like that so I don't get an extra spray around. Okay, so I've isolated this section down here, and now I'm going to use another shield. I'm going to use the spray bottle. I'm going to start with the green number 1 and fine mist sprayer. And I prime the pump. Now I hold back the sprayer about 12 inches away because I just want to spray into that area to get it started. Okay, and then I'll pick up this mixture here now. What I did was I mixed in yellow lemon, and I mixed a little bit of Payne's gray. And that makes a real dark green. Put that in a fine mist bottle. Find the pump, and I'm going to go ahead and squirt that on there. Hold it back about 12 inches away. I just want the spray to hit it, not a lot of. Now it's going to say really darken it down, okay? And then I'll take a tissue and wipe off the excess on my shield. Okay. All right, I'll pick this up. You can see that pretty well. That covered that background. I didn't have to touch the actual painting itself, which is the advantage of using a dot sprayer or a fine mist sprayer, is you don't have to actually paint over top of the subject. So what I may do now is I may add in a little bit more color in there, because I want that to be really darker. So I'll pick up a little bit of Ultramarine Blue, and I'll go in there and just go in and add a little more, just a little more color on top of what I have here, just here and there, because it's background, and it's the background color behind the fence, and it was dark there, shadow. So I'm putting some darker color there. Everything in front of this tree line was in shadow because of those tall trees. And I want to soften up the edge here. I don't want a hard edge or a straight edge. I want to make it a little bit irregular on this side. Okay, now we'll let that dry a bit. Now I'm going to go over here on this side and do the same thing. I'm going to block off this area. I'm going to paint behind with a spray bottle. To here. And need to go up a little higher. Right there. Over here. And I'm going to put another piece of tape in here on this side. Okay. Now I've got my shield here to keep myself from going outside of the area. So I'm isolating myself right down to that point there. Okay, so now I'm going to take again the fine mist sprayer. It's already primed, and I'm going to hold hold this up here a little bit more. I'll move the towel over a little bit more to this side. Make sure you can see this now. Okay. All right, so I'm going to be spraying this section over here. I've got the towel behind. I've got a shield here to keep it from going anywhere, but other than that spot right there. So I'm going to hold the sprayer about 12 inches away, and I'm going to go ahead and spray a fine mist into that area. Okay. And I'm going to take the darker mixture, which I told you before, this was Payne's gray mixed in with yellow lemon, and it's a very dark green. Pulling it back gives me a fine mist and a very dark color. Okay. Now I'm going to pick up the shield that I made out of paper, and I'll put that aside. Okay, that darkened that up very nicely. Okay, so I've got do a little bit of touch up here using some ultramarine blue behind the pencil line, behind the tree line over here, and merging that in with this color here. So I'm just mixing the colors together here and taking some of that dark green and then mixing it with the dark blue up here around the tree line. That's where the real shadow, the shadow behind that trees, covering up that area right there. Now as I come down here now, I'm going to have a little shadow from this tree here right to the edge of this fence line. So I'm going to cover this in right here just a little shadow pattern, just a little shadow color right here. And I'm going to bring that down now with just a little brush work. I don't want a straight edge, so I want to bring this down, take a little bit of brush work here. I want a straight edge. I want kind of an irregular edge coming down here, just from the trees and everything, the shadow pattern. Okay. All right, now I'm gonna dry that out. Put the hair dryer on. So now I'm going ahead with the fine mist sprayer, and I've added in a dark background behind this fence line. And I'm following my painting plan of making a darker value behind the fence. So I just continue on, just drying this out real good. Okay, that can dry a little bit longer to take its time there. Okay, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to paint in some of those trees now, and I'll go ahead and put in the shadow pattern. Let's say I'm going to mix up a little bit of mixture here of tree color for the bare trees, and I used I'm using burnt sienna and a little bit of ultramarine blue. That'll give me a darker brown color. Now what I want to do with the rigger now is that, okay, you mix the paint up and you load the rigger with the color. But then you want to blot out the extra moisture on the you don't want too much paint in, you don't want too much water in that brush. Okay, that's the thing about watercolor. You have to learn, you have to train yourself how to control the amount of water in the brush. So I'm going to take this brush stroke up a little bit higher now. It's a little bit longer, a little bit higher than what I had on Plein Air, because I left a little bit of room here for growth. So this was you saw part of the demonstration when I did it in Plein Air. I did some limbs and areas like this. I wanted to wait till I got back to the studio to put in more detail. Kind of put the put the icing on the cake, finish off the details. These limbs were quite long, quite slender as they moved out, and there was another a little smaller tree along here that went right by this bigger tree. There was some overlapping of the limbs there, which is very nice. It gives a nice feeling of thickness in there, and when the leaves come out, this is all covered with leaves here. Okay, more paint in the brush. I load the brush from the right hand side, on the side of the brush, and I take out the extra moisture with a tissue. And I'm going to put in there's a tree here right behind this fence that I'm going to put in. And it went up, this was a closer tree, so its limbs were a little bit longer looking because it's closer. Lots of limbs, lots of limbs. It means there's going to be lots of leaves out there on this tree when it comes longer this spring. There'll be more and more leaves growing out there. So a nice light touch with a rigger brush gives you a nice feeling of the branches. Okay, there were 3 or 4 trees back here in this tree line that's covered this whole area. That makes a nice little contrast here with the sunrise. And now there wasn't a bare tree here, but I'm gonna go. I like to make when I make a tree area over here. I want to do I'm going to echo the same shapes over here somewhere. So I'm going to take a tree over here and build a small tree with bare branches on. And that kind of breaks up this solid lump of trees over here. Kind of breaks up the flow a little bit. Keep a little more interest in the painting. A little smaller tree here, but it still adds a little interest to this side also. Okay, a little similar a similar pattern over here, but smaller, just to indicate there was other trees out here in the background. Okay, that pretty well completes the background as far as I want to go on this one. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and put in the next step. I'm going to put in a shadow pattern. So I'm going to take the flat brush, the 1/2 inch flat brush. I'm going to mix up a shadow color. And let me get this out of here. So I'm going to use the color of the. I'm going to use the color of the road, which was burnt sienna, a little bit of ultramarine blue. I'm going to put a touch of quinacridone violet into it, just a little bit. That'll give me a shadow color. A little bit of burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, and a touch of quinacridone violet. Okay, I'm going to water it down just a little bit because the shadow is going to be not as dark as the background. So let me see here. That's a bit too dark. Now, may appear in this section here. Take a little bit of the orange and mix it in here to remember there's orange coming from the sunrise, so I can put a little orange into the mixture here, just a little bit. Okay, then I can start building the shadow pattern. So I'm going to come out of here and start out from the background shadow, and come on out with the shadow pattern. And I'll have some little edges here on the shadow pattern showing that the trees and so forth will be reflected here. Now, as I come forward, the shadow will be less pronounced. I mean, it's going to be a shadow, but it'll be less intense because the light coming over the treetop now is lighting up this whole area. So this area back in here will have a little more light on it, so it won't be as much darkness coming forward. Water in that. Okay, I'll also make the shadow come over more than halfway. I didn't want it to be split the middle of the paint. I want to bring it over a little bit more. And then there's another part of the cast shadow over here on this side of the fence. Which comes off this way. And then this one is got a slope to it because the trees were just a little bit shallower here. So I'm going to bring this up here. Okay, now I'm going to take a rigger brush now. I'm going to make a shadow pattern from the actual trees themselves. So right from here, this tree coming down will have a shadow cast. A little darker. A little more pigment to it. A little more pigment. Of course, the shadows are not exactly the same as the subject. They're a little more ragged and a little more irregular, but still give the impression of the light causing the shadow behind the tree line. Okay, let me dry that for a little minute. Just get me dry for a minute, and we'll put in the last step. Okay, so I went ahead and added a shadow pattern down on the roadway, which was caused by the background trees and the bare trees that are casting shadow from the sunrise. And I used a little darker color on it to show a shadow. And I'm drying it off so it's nice and dry. Okay. All right, now the last step I'm going to do is I'm going to paint in the, going back to my painting plan. My painting plan here was to do the background, and I'm going to put the shadow pattern, and I'm going to add in the white post on the fence. They'll show up better against this darker background. So that's the decisions I made as I was looking over the painting as I came back to the studio. I was going over a reference of what I was going to do. So coming up with a painting plan before you start painting is always a good idea. So I'm loading the brush on the side. And I'm going to take out the extra pigment or extra water. And I'm going to start here on the right hand side, and I'm going to start with this larger post here. And this is white, Chinese white, and this is going to make it's going to dry a little bit lighter than when I put it down, but it's still going to be white. And I'm really following the photographs of what I had for the reference partially. The rest of it's going to be more or less artistic license. What I want to do is just try to make these subjects or objects stand out against the dark background. And the best way to do that. Now I lay the brush down now to do these horizontal portions. Lay the brush down flat. Don't use the tip of the brush. And then lay it flat and then drag it straight. So that gives you the straight feeling. Just lay it flat and drag it straight across. I'll put one up here. Yeah, there were other poles or actual wood there that were in between these main rails, which crossed over. And as I said in the earlier video, that there's no nails in these particular fences. They're all held together by pressure of the wood and the way they're stacked together. So they can be removed and moved around and changed in location and so forth, which were done in the olden times. This is an old colonial fence. I just I'm always fascinated by these old fences. Uh, Number one, they're very artistic and they're very historical. There's a lot of historical reference here. It shows a lot of things that how it was done in the past. So that one there is done, and we'll get the left side. Now, left side. Remember the left side I showed you here. I had to. It was only this side I was looking at. I had to find another a fence that would match plan here on the left. So I found one right next to this one, and this one worked out fine. And so this composition was done on site by observation. So when you're on location and looking at a subject matter, no matter what it is, you can also look around and see if there's something else that can be added to the painting that would give it more interest. And this is what I did here. I found something not in the actual location, but right nearby. There was another fence line that I could use and put it in a position that would make sense to tell the story of the split rail fences, and how they're shaped, and what they look like. I'm sure everybody has looked at old movies and old photographs can see pictures of these old fences. They were very prominent in the colonial days. That's all they had. They didn't have modern uh, equipment and stuff like that. They had to use what they had. So they have plenty of wood around, trees. So they manufactured their own uh, fences and so forth out of what they had. And that's the ingenuity of the individual people. What I'm going to do over here now, I'm going to continue with this thought. I'm going to have let this lay down the brush. I'm going to have this continue out to the side over here. So this fence line here is going to continue. So I'm adding this in right now. I think that makes more sense that the fence would take a little turn here. These, if you look at these from the above, they're a zigzag configuration. They don't go straight across or straight down. They're zigzag, and that helps the position of the fence posts, and also makes them line up better. So there's a lot of say engineering rules here of constructing a fence line that works. And this one worked well. It worked for many years until they invented the wire fences and the barbed wire fences, and everything changed. Okay. And I'm just about finishing up here. This last railing over here is at the end of the fence line. And there were a few posts sticking up. These straight posts held the fence together. I mean, they were all over the place. And I think I will add a little more. Now you can see the Chinese white paint uh, got lighter as it dried out, so you can go back in and put another little layer on it, kind of juice it up a little bit with a little more highlights.
Which brush are you using right now?
What?
Which brush?
Oh, this is the number 4 rigger from Holbein, and it's a very nice brush. It's a synthetic brush, but boy, it does a nice job. So I'm adding a little more punch here to the fence, the Chinese white, just adding another layer in there. And I'll put a little more on this side over here. As the paint dries, it gets lighter. I'm going in, adding a little more highlights on some of the posts, some of the rails. Okay. All right, so let's put a mat around this and take a look at the final painting. Move it up a little bit. Okay, so that is the split rail fence at dawn or at sunrise. That's what I'm going to call this painting. Okay, and that concludes the. And I think I came pretty close to what I did here in my plan. My plan was to add that to it, and I think it came out the way I planned right there. Okay, and I think that was an improvement from the plein air session because the painting had dried much more. Okay, let's go back to my main camera. I enjoy painting that. Realize that those split rail fences are one of my favorite subject matter, and they're not very common to find. You need to go places, Williamsburg and other colonial cities and areas. You need to go to the old historical sites to find those kinds of fences around. There's split rail fence system. So I really enjoyed doing that, and I hope you enjoyed that also. If you have any comments or questions about it, please give me a comment on the links below. And also, if you would go along with my Facebook page and download the diagram and download the pictures, and post it on my Everett Watercolors art group on Facebook. I think we'd enjoy seeing that, and I'll make a comment on anything that's provided on that particular page. So that's it for today, and we'll be back again next week on Thursday at 2 o'clock